There is a prayer in the Bible that was sincere, desperate, and deeply personal. It was not made by someone distant from God, nor by someone rebellious. It was the prayer of a faithful servant, someone who had devoted his life to God's work. And yet, God said no. This prayer came from Moses. Moses, the man chosen by God to lead Israel out of slavery in Egypt, the man who faced Pharaoh and demanded freedom for God's people, the man who witnessed plagues, miracles, and the parting of the Red Sea. Even he experienced a denied prayer. Moses had dedicated 40 years to guiding a stubborn, complaining, and often ungrateful people through the wilderness. He had faced rebellion, disobedience, and even violent opposition. He had fasted, interceded, pleaded, and carried burdens that no ordinary person could bear. Through it all, he remained faithful. He spoke to God directly. He saw God's glory, and he acted as God's representative to the people. And yet, near the end of his life, Moses prayed a simple, heartfelt request. He asked God to let him enter the promised land. It was a natural prayer. He had spent decades leading the people to the edge of the land God had promised their ancestors. He had dreamed of this moment for nearly his entire adult life. It was the land he had spoken of to others, the land he had longed to see, the land he had been working toward in obedience to God. "Please," he said, "let me cross over and see the good land beyond the Jordan." And God refused. Scripture tells us plainly, "That is enough. Do not speak to me any more about this matter." There was no explanation, no negotiation, no compromise, just a firm, unshakable refusal. Moses was allowed to see the land from a distance, but he would never step foot in it. For many, this is a shocking and uncomfortable moment, because Moses did nearly everything right. He followed God's commands. He led Israel faithfully. He interceded for others constantly. He had earned, by any human measure, the fulfillment of his long-awaited dream. Yet even the most faithful sometimes encounter God's no. Earlier in his journey, Moses had struck the rock in frustration rather than speaking to it as God commanded. In that moment, he misrepresented God's holiness before the people. It was an act of disobedience, and there were consequences. Still, Moses prayed, and God listened. But listening does not always mean granting. This is a hard truth many believers wrestle with. God can love you deeply and still deny the thing you desire most. God can approve of your faith, your obedience, and your heart, and still close a door you prayed would open. Sometimes God's no is not a punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. Moses' life was a story of extraordinary obedience and faithfulness, yet even he had limitations imposed by God. His assignment was not to enter the promised land. It was to lead the people to its edge. It was to train, guide, and prepare the next generation who would take the land for themselves. Joshua's role was different. He would lead them in. Even though Moses never stepped into the land, his life was not wasted. Every lesson he taught, every prayer he offered, every act of faith shaped a nation. His obedience laid the foundation for Israel's future. His faith was a model for generations to come. And God himself honored Moses. The Bible tells us that God buried him. No crowd, no ceremony, just God. A quiet, personal honor for a man whose life had been entirely devoted to God's will. Years later, Moses appears on the Mount of Transfiguration, standing with Jesus, along with Elijah. He was in the promised land at last, in the presence of Christ. The prayer God refused was not the end of Moses' story. It was a step in a larger plan, part of a purpose he could not yet see. Sometimes, our prayers are refused for reasons we cannot understand. Sometimes, what we want most is not what God has planned for us. Sometimes, a denied prayer is preparing us for a glory, a responsibility, or a blessing beyond our imagination. Think about your own life. The prayers you have offered, the dreams you have held, the doors you have knocked on. Maybe some remain closed. Perhaps God has said no to something you desired deeply, even though you were faithful, even though you tried your best. This does not mean he is absent. This does not mean he is angry. It does not mean you failed. God sees the bigger picture. He knows the path your life must take. He knows the ways your obedience and your struggles will shape the people around you and the generations to come. Moses teaches us that unanswered prayer is not rejection. It is part of God's plan, a test of faith, a shaping of purpose, and a preparation for something greater than we can see. God's no may feel like loss, but it is never meaningless. His refusals are never final without purpose. The prayer God denies may lead to the greatest fulfillment you could not imagine, the unseen land you have been walking toward your entire life. Moses' story is a reminder. Faithfulness is honored. Obedience is rewarded in ways beyond our understanding. Even when the prayer is refused, the purpose continues. And even when the dream is delayed, God's plan is never denied. So when you face unanswered prayers, remember Moses. Remember that God is still working, even when you cannot see it. Remember that his no does not mean he is absent, but that his yes may be coming in ways you cannot yet imagine. And remember, sometimes God says no, not because you have failed, but because your purpose is far greater than the moment you see. Thank you for joining us today on Eden Notes. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more shocking facts in the Bible. God bless you.